19 tonight. Tonight we're going to deal with verses 14 down through the end of the chapter. Then next week I'm going to come back and pick up a couple of verses in this chapter leading into chapter number 20. But as we get down toward the end of the Bible, we're getting toward the end of the time. God has marked this thing out right, 6,000 years man was to work, seventh day was a day of rest. 6,000 years of time, 4,000 years to the birth of Christ, 2,000 years after the birth of Christ, you've got 6 days, and then the millennial reign of Jesus Christ. When we get to this place, we're coming to a place called Armageddon. So we want to look at Armageddon for a few minutes tonight. Armageddon, and I just put down as a culmination of the conflict between Satan and God. Listen, there's been a hatred there for thousands of years. God only knows the hatred that's in the heart of Satan tonight as he has turned this world. You know, people are easily influenced for evil. I've often said you don't have to teach a child to do wrong. They automatically, small children gravitate in there and they have to be corrected and taught to do right. They don't have to be taught to do wrong. You can say 100 good words and one bad word, and guess which one they'll pick up and repeat? The one you put the emphasis on. That's exactly the one they're going to pick up and repeat. So what we find is people migrate to evil. The Bible says that evil communications corrupt good manners. That's why we as God's children have to stay away from the things of the world that would defile us. Because the world will have more influence on you than you will have on the world. So you got to be careful. In verse number 14, he began with the armies which were in heaven followed him. Now, Christ is coming back on a white horse at the end of the millennium. Jacob's trouble or the tribulation period. If you go to chapter number 6, verse number 1, Antichrist began it on a white horse because he's an impostor. But at the same time, when Christ comes back, listen, this thing's done on earth. Tribulation period is over at this point in time. So when heaven's open in verse number 11, and he came back again, the Bible said the armies which were with him in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. Now that's prophetic of the millennial reign of Christ. And he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. I want you to notice the terminology he uses. Verse 16, he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. King of Kings and Lord of Lords are in caps. Verse number 17, I saw an angel standing in the sun. And he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. And I saw the beast, and the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone, and the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. Now, I want to break these verses down for a few minutes tonight. But as we come to Armageddon, we come to the end of the conflict basically between Satan and God. Now, during the end of the millennial reign of Christ, Satan is going to be loosed for a little season. He'll go about deceiving the world. They'll gather armies again in what's called the Battle of Gog and Magog. But they come to a place that's called Armageddon. Armageddon is a particular place. The word Armageddon just simply means a gathering where they will gather together, rendezvous together. If you go to Israel, most people are not really familiar with the topography or the ground layout in Israel. You've got a lot of mountains, you've got a lot of valleys. But if you get up to Mount Carmel just sticks out a little bit up on the northwestern shore of Palestine or Israel. But you got Tyre and Sidon above them. But when you go to Mount Carmel, that's where Elijah was, that's where the conflict was. You look out over one of the largest, if not the largest valleys in the world. Some of you have probably, anybody been to the Holy Lands? Did they take you to Jezreel? All right, been to Jezreel time and time again. It's an immense valley. If you get up on Mount Carmel and look, that thing lays from the north to the south. Huge valley. This is where that battle of Armageddon will take place. Israel has always been the center of the earth. You can check, and this is as far as the land mass is concerned, you type in where is the center of the land mass of the earth, and they'll take you to Israel, and they'll take you right to that area because it is the center of the actual land mass itself. You got Asia to one side, you got the Americas to the other side. The Mediterranean Sea area is kind of centered up, and Israel is right in the middle of it. So it's a time that God's people throughout the ages have looked forward to. Aren't you looking forward to when God makes things right? Seems like wrong today always has an advantage over right in this world. You know, evil is spoken of as good, and good spoken as evil. And boy, this world just turned upside down today. It seems like everything that's wrong is being elevated, and everything that's right is being pushed down. That's going to come to an end. God's going to take care of that. It's a time when wrong will be destroyed by right. When this atheistic world that has denied God, they're going to be destroyed by the God that they chose to ignore and to reject. These verses speak of the Battle of Armageddon. If you want to read your notes, that is to be differentiated between the Battle of Gog and Magog, which will take place at the end of the millennium. But the Bible refers to this place as Armageddon. In Revelation 16:16, you find the only time in the Bible that you'll find the word Armageddon. And he gathered them together. Now, when you get to chapter 16, you're right in the center of the tribulation period. But what he's doing, he puts a little parenthetical, and he projects or prophesies what's going to take place in the latter part. He said he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. The prophecy's right. The place is right. The time's right. Listen, the harvest is going to be ripe. The judge is going to be right. Everything is going to be right. The earth today is about ripe for the judgment of God. But the word of Armageddon means rendezvous. I took it back to Joel. I was reading the other day in the book of Joel. I just finished Amos, and now I'm in Joel. I try to read in 6 or 7 different places across the Bible so that I kind of divide the Bible up. I read over in the first part of the Bible and toward the center. I try to read at least 7 chapters a day, but I like to keep my hand on the whole Bible, just to move them across. I'm reading in the New Testament, Old Testament. I'm reading in the minor prophets and the major prophets and the poetical books and the historical books back in the Pentateuch, and try to keep a hand on this thing. But as you do that, the other day I was reading the book of Joel, and listen what he said about Armageddon. He said, "Let the heathen be awakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get ye down, for the press is full, the fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon shall be darkened, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. The Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake. But the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So shall ye know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then shall Jerusalem be holy. There shall be no strangers pass through her any more. And it shall come to pass in that day that the mountains shall drop down new wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the rivers of Judah shall flow with waters, and a fountain shall come forth of the house of the Lord, and shall water the valley of Shittim. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom will be a desolate wilderness, for the violence against the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah shall dwell forever in Jerusalem from generation to generation, for I will cleanse their blood that I have not cleansed, for the Lord dwelleth in Zion. When you get over to Revelation chapter number 14, we find the same terminology basically used. You can tie the book of Revelation back to the prophets, to the major and minor prophets, also to the book of Daniel. But in Revelation 14, he said, another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Look at verse 20. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horses' bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. That's a river of blood, 4 feet deep to the horses' bridles, 200 miles long, because of the slaughter of the wicked. When these armies come in that he's talking about in verse number 19, there are going to be great multitudes of people. I read some years ago where China said that they were able to field an army of over 200 million men. That means if you put those men 8 abreast and you march them into the sea and drown them 8 abreast, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that army would still be growing in numbers. Sometimes we don't realize the size of some of these nations. I'm talking about population-wise. India is probably the second most populous nation on earth. But China has over 1.5 billion people in China itself. Probably it's in the neighborhood of 2 billion people at this particular time. America is what, 330 million people. Maybe you're talking about 1.5 to 2 billion people. So we're talking about a huge amount of people. But he's talking about the blood that's going to come through that valley because of the slaughter of these armies, 4 feet deep. And it's going to run for 200 miles. Over in the book of Isaiah, he said this, Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments of Bozrah? This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. He's referring the second coming of Christ. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine vat? I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in mine anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. For the day of the vengeance is in mine heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. What a terrible place it's going to be. In His first advent, we dealt with the coming of Christ. The Bible said he came meek and lowly on the foal of an ass. In his first advent, he became a babe born in humility. He was born in poverty, as he that was rich became poor for us, that through his poverty we might be made rich. He was born in weakness of humanity, that he might be touched with the feeling of our infirmity, as the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. In his first advent, he established his second. We often quote around Christmas time Isaiah chapter number 9, but at verse number 6 and 7 deal with two aspects of Jesus Christ. I put the first down, Isaiah chapter 9, verse number 6, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. Boy, you thank God for Christmas, don't you? I enjoy that time of the year. It's so short. I love Thanksgiving through the first of the year. Boy, you get ready for Thanksgiving, and then all of a sudden it's Thanksgiving, and 6 more weeks it's Christmas, New Year's, and then you're into what I call the dog days of winter. That's what February is. February is a time where Christmas is over with, you're waiting for spring, and now you got to put up with the dog days of winter just like summer. But he spoke of the first coming, a child is born, a son is given. But if you look in the rest of that, the Bible said in the second advent, he comes as the Word of God and the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Look at Isaiah, the second part of that, chapter number 6. And the government shall be upon his shoulder. When Christ came the first time, the government was not upon his shoulders. He didn't come to rule and reign in that first. So when you get Isaiah chapter 9 that we read, it deals with first advent, a son was given, and second advent, the government shall be upon his shoulder. Now look what he said in Isaiah. And his name shall be called Wonderful. Boy, what a wonderful thing when our Savior comes. Counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Verse number 7, he talks about that of the increase of his government and peace. There shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with justice, or judgment, and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So we find when he's coming back, what he's going to do in chapter number 20, we'll deal with that in a couple of weeks, is he's going to set up the millennial reign of Christ. It's called the Golden Age, 1,000 years that Christ will reign from Jerusalem, from the throne of his father David. He'll rule with a rod of iron. He'll put up with no disobedience. They'll actually see him there. I've often thought about that. Today we live in a world that is gospel hardened. One of the things about the Bible Belt, I heard a man say one time, and I thought it was pretty good. He said that the Bible Belt has been inoculated with the gospel. You hear a lot about vaccines. What is a vaccine? It's when you inoculate somebody with just enough of the dead stuff to keep them from getting the real thing. I've said for years that the Bible Belt's unbuckled. Basically, we are in the heart of the Bible Belt here. You've got churches everywhere. They have left the foundations of their fathers. They have so changed over my lifetime. Boy, I look back in my lifetime, the changes in churches in America. It's an astounding thing. So what we find is they've been inoculated. They've been given enough of the dead stuff that it keeps them from getting the real thing. You know, a lot of people today won't even receive a tract. We were up in Greenville at Harbor Inn on Friday. When I go see my doctor, we go get fish up at Harbor Inn. I hope everybody has been up there and tried that. It's just like the Blue Ocean, only half price. Very, very good. Right up on Haywood Road up there. So we went up there, and as I was paying for the bill, and Barbara and them had already left and gone out to get in the car. The young lady asked me a question. I handed her a tract, and I told her I wanted to invite her to church. And she looked at me and she said, "Would I be welcome to come to your church?" I said, "Well, if you weren't welcome, I wouldn't have invited you." And she got interested real quick, and she started talking about, "I'd like to come to your church." I said, "Well, lady, all you've got to do is come to the church." We're open for business Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, or whatever night. And if that don't suit you, I'll make one for you. And we'll make sure that you get to go to church, you're able to go to church. But I got to share the gospel to her, and it was refreshing to see somebody literally hanging on to every word that I was saying. I stayed in there not too long, maybe 5-10 minutes, and shared the gospel with her with another lady. But we live in a place that is gospel hardened. When you get to the millennial reign of Christ, they're literally going to see Christ on his throne. They'll still hate him, folks. They hate him for who he is. They'll be glory hardened in the millennium, where they are gospel hardened in the day in which we live. Now, let's break them down a little bit. Verse 11, we saw his appearance. We find that he's called faithful and true, and in righteousness doth he judge and make war. He's not coming back the way he left. In verse number 14, we see his followers. The word armies is used instead of the word army. Most millions on earth have an army, a military branch to serve and protect, but the plural usage is because his armies will be made up of the multitudes that will come from every nation on earth. In verse 19, the Bible uses the word army as opposed to the armies of the beast and the kings of the earth. No contradiction in the word uses. The Lord's armies will be diverse in their ethnicity, but totally unified in their following. Thus, the armies will become an army that is single. I kind of used a little illustration. In World War I and II, we had armies that fought together to defeat a common enemy, but today we have the United Nations that often sends an occupation force to an area in a peacekeeping role, or in extreme cases to fight a common enemy. These armies fight together but are far from unified, which often causes the conflict of interest among the sending nations. The Lord's armies, though diverse in their original ethnicity, are totally unified in their allegiance and purpose. We're coming back with him, folks. We're going to fight with him. In verse 17 and 18, you see the supper of God. This is not the marriage supper of the Lamb. But in verse 17, he said, I saw an angel standing in the sun. He cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God. What they're going to do in verse 18, they're going to devour the flesh of men, the flesh of animals. They'll devour all of the flesh. Most of these birds in our days are protected species. You know, it's against the law to shoot a buzzard. It's against the law to shoot falcons. It's against the law to shoot these animals that eat carrion, that they eat things, and I believe that's to be right. I thank God that they clean things up. But God's going to bring them from all of the earth, and they're coming over to the Middle East. Sometimes we see, I don't know if you'd call them a flock or what, of blackbirds. I'm not talking about crows, but I'm talking about actual blackbirds. When you see thousands of these little blackbirds up here, I have hunted fields before and sat in the woods at the bottom of a field, and I've watched thousands of them light in the top of that field. And they'll sit and they'll feed, and then they'll lift up. And they'll fly down a few feet and they'll light again, and they'll sit there and eat everything on the ground. Then they just work their way down the fields. Anybody ever seen them do that? That's what's going to happen over there. All of these birds are going to come and they're going to devour that flesh. Verse 19, the armies of the world gather under the leadership of the beast. That's what you see setting up today. That's called globalism. Today we live in NATO, with days of NATO and different type groups that get together to protect and to serve together and to fight common enemies. Folks, this world is setting up very quickly into what's called globalism. Years ago, the President of the United States said that America was not an exceptional nation. It is an exceptional nation. Did you know America was called the Great Experiment? When America set up back in the 1700s, there had never been a nation on earth set up as a republic with a constitution. The United States was the very first one. And what happened, they called it the Great Experiment because this had never happened before in the history of mankind. But if you look at America over the last 250 years, America has chosen to leave that form of government behind. That's what they are today. We're turning very quickly into a democracy. America was never meant to be a democracy. The Bible said, unto the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. America is a republic. What's a republic? A republic protects the rights of the minorities. That's why when you elect a president, it's not popular vote that elects that president. That's democracy. But it's actually the votes of these nation or states. You take South Dakota, North Dakota, these out in there, folks, they would never have any say-so in government if we were a democracy. America would be ruled by the inner cities where all of your concentrations of people are. If you look at the blue and the red states and all this, boy, you find the blue are very small, but they're very populous. What happens is when you move into a democracy, which is mob rule, you start moving into what's called globalism. And that is the welfare of the multitude over the welfare of the minority. In verse number 20, we find that that beast and that false prophet who deceived the world and caused them to take the mark of the beast and bow to the image, God's going to take that crown out. These two will be the first to be cast into the lake of fire. By the way, that is the first mention of the words lake of fire. They were cast into the lake of fire alive. No perishing of the wicked, but an eternal punishment, burning with fire and brimstone and sulfur, taken before the eyes of the armies that followed them, their confidence absolutely destroyed. These people that are going to follow the beast, who is ahead of the political system, the false prophet is ahead of the religious system, and God's going to take those two first, and He's going to pluck them up. I thought about Herod over in the book of Acts. Herod made a great oration, and the people praised him as being a god, and he didn't give God glory. And the Bible said God just simply picked him up by the nape of the neck, dropped him into hell, and said that the worms ate his flesh. God's going to take the leadership that's being set up right now. Antichrist is coming. Then he's going to rule both political and religious systems. But that beast and false prophet in verse number 20, it said the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. We find these armies in verse number 19 that come into the valley of Jezreel. Huge armies, massive shows of strength. They talk a lot about Russia and Ukraine today. They make much out of an army of 100,000 men, and that is a substantial army. But if you go back into the days of Israel, some of these armies had over 1 million soldiers in them, and they fought together. Israel, under the days of David and otherwise, could field an army of about 1.2 million men. They had that many men. So we see that God's going to take in front of these armies. He's led them in. He's let them draw into the valley of Jezreel. And as they come in, He's going to take the leadership and drop them in the lake of fire. Daniel chapter 7 said this, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the white of his hair like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him. 1,000 times 1,000 is 1 million. Notice he uses the word thousands in the plural, a number that cannot be numbered, and 10,000 times 10,000. Hey, we're talking about masses in these multitudes that'll stand before him. The judgment was set, the books were opened. I beheld then, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake, I beheld even till the beast was slain, his body destroyed, and given to the burning of flames. So we find the setting up. He's going to take the head of them first, and then the armies that follow them. In verse number 21, let's look at that, and then we'll go get into the Lord's table. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse. Now, what is that sword? It proceedeth out of his mouth. As God created with his voice, God can destroy with his voice. As these armies gather, in man's eyes, they are armies that cannot be matched. Armies that no man can stand before. But God just simply, with the voice of the word of his mouth, he will destroy these armies, and all of the fowls were filled with their flesh. After the leaders are cast into the lake of fire, the remnant of the army is destroyed, and the flesh of them and their horses become carrion for the birds of the prey that will fill the air. That the sword comes out of his mouth indicates that he wins the battle with the power of his word. Though the saints return with Christ to reign and rule, they are not the executioners. That is his work. And he will destroy them with the power of his word, with the sword that proceeds out of his mouth. And the end of the wicked will be followed by Christ setting up his kingdom, the millennial reign of Christ, called the kingdom or golden age. So you find Armageddon, again to be differentiated from Gog and Magog that takes place in Ezekiel 38 and 39. But we're getting ready to get into the setting up of the millennial reign of Christ. Boy, what a beautiful thing when God comes back and he puts his earth back the way it was. He's going to take this thing and put it back the way it was in the millennial reign of Christ. And you and I that are saved tonight will get to rule and reign with him for 1,000 years in that kingdom age. Amen. And I'm looking forward to it. All right, we're going to stand tonight if you need to come. We'll give an invitation. If you need to come tonight, you come. I thank God that I'll be with him in heaven. I'm going to be on the right side of the battle. By the way, you won't have to fight. The Lord's going to do that for you. Well, these youngins come to pray tonight. If you need to come, you come.